I'm 32 years old, and until a few months ago, I was engaged to my girlfriend of 5 years. We'll call her Sarah. My younger brother, Mike, is 29 and has always been the golden child in our family. To truly grasp the gravity of this betrayal and why it has hit me so hard, I need to provide some background on our family dynamic and how we arrived at this point. Growing up, Mike could do no wrong in our parents' eyes, whereas I was continually chastised and punished for minor infractions. This wasn't your average sibling rivalry or subtle favoritism. It was blatant and relentless. Mike would break something, and I'd be blamed. He'd start a fight, and I'd get grounded. If we both earned straight A's, he'd get a new video game console, while I'd get a pat on the back and a reminder to keep it up. Our parents, Tom and Linda, constantly made excuses for their behavior. Mike's younger. He needs more attention, or you're the older one. You should know better, or Mike's just more sensitive. We have to be careful with him. Their endless justifications and gaslighting left me feeling useless and despised in my own home. As we grew older, their favoritism became even more apparent. When I got into a good college on a partial scholarship, they barely acknowledged it. However, when Mike chose to attend community college, they threw him a lavish celebration and even bought him a car. Never mind that I'd been biking 5 miles each way to my part-time job for years. I moved out as soon as I could to escape the toxic environment. I supported myself through college by working 2 jobs and taking out loans. Meanwhile, Mike dropped out after 1 semester, claiming college wasn't for him. Our parents praised his decision, saying he was brave for knowing himself and refusing to conform to societal expectations. They even funded a series of failed business ventures he embarked on afterward. Despite my efforts to distance myself, family gatherings were a recurring nightmare of subtle jabs and comparisons. "Oh, you're still in that entry-level position? Well, Mike is considering starting another business. He's so entrepreneurial." Never mind that I was building a stable career while Mike drained our parents' retirement savings. Despite everything, I tried to maintain a relationship with Mike. He was still my brother, after all, but it was always one-sided. I'd reach out, only for him to ignore me or turn every conversation into a competition. If I got promoted, he'd suddenly have a big opportunity on the horizon. If I started dating someone, he'd inevitably announce he was in a serious relationship. I met Sarah while trying to reconnect with Mike. She was a friend of one of his short-lived girlfriends, and we hit it off immediately. Sarah was everything I wanted in a partner: intelligent, funny, kind, and stunningly beautiful. For the first time in my life, I felt genuinely happy and valued. My parents, of course, weren't thrilled. They made sarcastic remarks about Sarah being out of my league and questioned what she saw in me. Mike, on the other hand, seemed unusually interested in my life. He constantly asked about Sarah, wanting to know everything about her. At the time, I was just relieved he seemed to care. Looking back, I should have noticed the red flags. Sarah and I moved in together after a year of dating, and it was wonderful. We both had stable jobs, traveled together, and often talked about our future. I started to believe I could finally have the life I'd always dreamed of: a fulfilling career, a loving partner, and perhaps children someday. I proposed to Sarah on our 4th anniversary. It was a simple, intimate evening at home with a heartfelt speech. When she said yes, I was ecstatic. We planned a long engagement, wanting to take our time with wedding preparations. We weren't in a rush. We had our whole lives ahead of us. Or so I thought. When we announced our engagement to my family, their reactions were mixed. My mom forced a smile and said, "Oh, how nice," in a tone that suggested it was anything but. My dad grunted, "Good luck with that," before returning to the television. Mike, however, had the strangest reaction. He congratulated us, but his smile seemed almost predatory. I dismissed it, chalking it up to my own insecurities. The next year was a whirlwind of wedding planning and work stress. Sarah and I both worked long hours to save for the wedding and a down payment on a house. We didn't see each other as much, but I assumed it was just a phase every couple goes through. Looking back, I should have seen the signs. Sarah became distant, always on her phone, smiling at messages she dismissed as work stuff. She started going out more with friends, coming home late smelling of wine and cologne. But I trusted her completely. The thought of her cheating never crossed my mind, let alone with my own brother. A few months ago, Sarah started acting strangely. She was moody, irritable, and often nauseous. I dared to hope she might be pregnant. We hadn't been trying, but we talked about having kids in the future. I began dreaming of nursery colors and baby names. Then, one night, she sat me down, tears streaming down her face, and dropped the bombshell. She was pregnant, but the baby wasn't mine. I was stunned. We hadn't been intimate in weeks due to our hectic schedules, but I never imagined she'd cheat on me, let alone with my own brother. When I asked who the father was, she broke down and whispered, "It's Mike." My world collapsed in that moment. Everything I'd built my life around crumbled. I couldn't breathe or think. All I felt was a crushing sense of betrayal and loss. Sarah tried to explain through her sobs. It started at our engagement party. Mike had told her she was making a mistake marrying me. He preyed on her insecurities, claiming she deserved better and that he could offer her what I couldn't. It wasn't a one-time thing. They'd been having an affair for months. I kicked Sarah out that night. I couldn't stand to look at her. She begged for forgiveness, insisting it was a mistake and that she loved me. But all I could think about was how many times she'd lied to my face and been with my brother while wearing the ring I gave her. After she left, I called Mike. I don't remember much of the conversation, just an explosion of rage and pain. At first, he tried to downplay it as a drunken mistake. But when I pressed him, he got defensive, sneering, "Maybe if you'd been a better fiancé, she wouldn't have come to me." I saw red. I got in my car and drove to his apartment, unsure of what I intended to do. But when I arrived, our parents were already there. Mike had called them first, spinning a tale about how Sarah had seduced him and how sorry he was. And of course, they believed him. They always do. My mother immediately began lecturing me about forgiveness and family, while my father simply stood there with his arms crossed, looking disappointed in me, but not in his beloved Mike. I tried to explain what had actually happened, but they wouldn't listen. They kept telling me that I needed to forgive Mike and support Sarah throughout her pregnancy because family comes first. I lost it. Years of pent-up resentment and anger spilled forth. I told them exactly how I felt about their twisted sense of devotion, how they'd always favored Mike over me, and how they'd never taken my side or backed me. I told Mike that he was no longer my brother and that he had died. I told my parents they could have the son they'd always wanted because they didn't have me. I stormed off, ignoring their cries and pleas. I drove for hours with no destination in mind, only a need to be away from everything and everyone. When I eventually got home, I discovered dozens of missed calls and messages. Sarah begged for another opportunity, while Mike alternated between apologies and accusations. The majority, however, came from my parents, who demanded that I grow up and make amends. I ignored them all, rarely eating and sleeping. I called out of work, depleting all of my vacation days. I couldn't face anyone and couldn't handle the prospect of explaining what had happened. I just sat in my apartment, revisiting every detail of my relationship with Sarah and every interaction with Mike, trying to figure out where I went wrong. It has been 3 months now. I've relocated to a new apartment, changed my phone number, and begun therapy to deal with all of this. But my family will not give up. Despite my efforts to cut off communication, they continue to intrude in my life. They've begun showing up at my office, attempting to ambush me and push a reconciliation. My mother confronts me in the parking lot, wailing about how I'm ripping the family apart. My father leaves harsh voicemails, telling me to man up and forgive Mike. Mike himself has attempted to approach me several times, but I've managed to dodge him thus far. They've even dispatched flying monkeys disguised as extended family members to guilt-trip me into forgiving Mike. Aunts, uncles, and cousins I haven't spoken to in years are suddenly calling, telling me how important family is and how I should let bygones be bygones. It's as if they're in another reality, where Mike and Sarah made a little mistake rather than a life-altering one. I received a message from Sarah yesterday. She is keeping the baby and intends to co-parent with Mike. And guess what? My parents are overjoyed to become grandparents, forgetting the circumstances and the harsh remarks they used to make when Sarah was with me. The letter was full of apologies and explanations, including how she and Mike discovered real love through this terrible situation. She even had the nerve to suggest that she hoped we could all become friends eventually for the sake of the child. I am at my wit's end. Part of me wishes to sever ties altogether and start over somewhere else, perhaps moving to another state, changing my identity, and creating a new life where no one knows about this mess. But another part of me is so outraged that I want to stay and fight, to show them how twisted the situation is. I don't know what to do now. The treachery has had an impact on all aspects of my life. I cannot take being alone with my thoughts. I haven't even considered dating again. The idea of trusting someone like that scares me. I've also lost friends over this. Those who believe I should take the high road and reunite with my family, as if I'm terrible for refusing to play happy families with the people who have wounded me the most. The idea of Sarah and Mike raising a kid together, a child who should have been mine, is like a continual stab in my gut. I understand, cognitively, that the child is innocent in all of this. It is not the baby's fault that its parents are lying, cheating scumbags. But I can't bring myself to feel good about its existence. My parents have begun to discuss how I should be involved in the child's life, and how I will become an uncle. The concept makes me feel physically ill. How can I look at this youngster and not recognize the ultimate emblem of my brother's betrayal? So, Reddit, I guess my question is, am I the idiot for refusing to forgive my brother and ex-fiancé? Am I wrong to want to sever ties with my family over this? Any help on how to proceed would be greatly appreciated, as I now feel like I'm drowning in a sea of treachery and gaslighting. I apologize for the lengthy post. If you made it this far, I appreciate it. Writing all of this down has been cathartic in a way. I'm not sure what I hope to gain from sharing this: validation, guidance, or simply the opportunity to scream into the void and have someone, anybody, hear me. Edit. Holy God, this exploded overnight. Thank you all for your help and advice. I'm astonished by the response, and it will take me some time to look through all of the comments. However, I wanted to answer a few typical questions. Yes, I have consulted with a lawyer about getting a restraining order against my family. It is currently in progress. I don't intend to have any contact with the baby. It's not the child's fault, but I can't become involved without losing my sanity. For those who have inquired about my job, I have already spoken with HR about the situation. They are aware and supportive. They have strengthened security at the front desk and offered me the option to work from home more frequently. I am grateful for their understanding. Many of you have inquired whether I had contemplated relocating to another city or state. It is definitely something I am thinking about. My company has offices in several other cities, so a transfer may be possible. I'm considering the advantages and cons. To those suggesting a DNA test, Sarah acknowledged the affair, and the timeline is consistent. I see no reason to suspect the child is not Mike's. Even if it was mine, I doubt I could ever look at that child without thinking about this. I've been overwhelmed by the number of people who have had similar experiences. It's upsetting to realize how widespread this type of betrayal is, but it's also strangely comforting to know that I'm not alone. Thank you all for being vulnerable and sharing. To the individual who inquired if I'd considered taking legal action against Mike for alienation of affection, I looked into it, but it is not recognized in my state. Even if it were, I don't think I have the energy for a legal battle right now. Several people have noted that Mike's behavior appears narcissistic. I've started reading about narcissistic personality disorder, and much of it rings true. It helps me comprehend, but does not excuse some of his acts. Those who have inquired about Sarah's family are as startled and appalled as one could anticipate. They have cut off communication with her and have reached out to offer me their support. It's a minor comfort, but I value it. To the individual who asked if I'd considered having my own children someday, honestly, this entire experience has made me wonder whether I want to have a family at all. But I'm trying not to make any major decisions while I analyze everything. I'll keep you updated if anything big happens, but for the time being, my focus is on recovering and moving ahead. Thank you again, Reddit. You have helped more than you realize. Your encouragement and suggestions have given me a lot to think about, and they have truly been a lifeline during this tough time. I may not be able to answer every remark, but please know that I read them all, and they are making me feel less alone. Update. Hello, Reddit. It's been approximately 2 weeks since my previous post, and it has been a full roller coaster. First and foremost, thank you all for your enormous support and suggestions. I never anticipated my post to go so viral, and going through all of your responses has been both upsetting and oddly reassuring. It's disturbing how regular this type of exception is. The last several weeks have been tough, to say the least. Remember how I said I was working on obtaining a restraining order? That evolved into a huge ordeal. My lawyer filed the paperwork, and we had a hearing arranged. I assumed it would be simple, given the proof and the ongoing harassment. But I was mistaken. When my parents arrived at the court with their lawyer, some fancy guy in an expensive suit who likely charges more per hour than I earn in a week, they tried to portray me as the crazy one. They claimed I was ripping the family apart over a simple misunderstanding, as if Mike had just stumbled and accidentally fallen into my fiancé. Fortunately, the judge didn't buy their story. She issued a restraining order against Mike and my parents, though it came only after I broke down in tears in court, with my father glaring at me as though I'd committed murder. The look on Mike's face, though, if looks could kill, I would have been dead. As we left the courthouse, Mike attempted to approach me. My lawyer stepped between us, reminding him of the restraining order. Mike scoffed and said, "This isn't over. You can't hide behind a piece of paper forever." I'd be lying if I said his words didn't shake me, but at least I have some legal protection. The job situation has been another nightmare. Remember when I mentioned my family showing up at my workplace? That came to a head last week. I was in a meeting with a customer when my assistant alerted me that my mother was in the lobby causing a disturbance. She had brought a photo album and was showing my coworkers baby pictures of Mike and me while lamenting how close her boys used to be. I excused myself from the meeting and went down to find my mother surrounded by uncomfortable-looking coworkers. She was in the middle of a story about how Mike and I used to bathe together as toddlers when she spotted me. She tried to rush toward me, talking about a baby shower, but I interrupted her. I told her she had to leave immediately or I'd call the police and have her removed for trespassing and violating the restraining order. Her expression was as if I'd slapped her, but after everything they'd put me through, I couldn't bring myself to care. Security escorted her out, and I spent the next hour doing damage control with my employer and coworkers. Most understood, but I could tell some were wondering what kind of drama I was bringing into the office. But it was the fight with Mike that really threw everything off track. Last Saturday, I was at the gym, trying to let off some frustration on the punching bag. I was so caught up in my training that I didn't notice someone approaching until I heard his voice. I swung around and saw Mike smirking at me, as if he hadn't just broken the restraining order. He started speaking loudly enough for others to hear, and I ordered him to leave or I'd call the cops. He laughed and said he'd tell them how I had threatened him and Sarah. That was when I snapped. I swiped at him, my fist landing on his jaw. He stumbled back, then lunged at me. We ended up on the floor, trading blows like we were kids again. Except this time there was no one to separate us. No one telling me to let Mike win. I landed a few solid hits before the gym staff broke us up. Mike's nose was bleeding, and I could feel my own face swelling. We were both screaming, trying to break free and get back at each other. The gym manager threatened to call the cops, which finally shook me out of it. I grabbed my things and left, still shaking from the adrenaline. I was driving home when I received a call from an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. It was Sarah, shouting at me about how I had broken Mike's nose and how he might need surgery. I couldn't help but laugh. The ridiculousness of her being upset with me after everything they'd done was just too much. I apologized if I had upset her little boyfriend, whom she had been sleeping with behind my back for months. She started sobbing, talking about how anxious she was and how the baby could feel her pain, accusing me of being selfish. I hung up and blocked her number. The aftermath of the brawl was severe. The news spread like wildfire. My phone flooded with texts from friends and family, some supporting me, others criticizing me for assaulting my poor, defenseless brother. Sarah's parents reached out to express their support for me and their displeasure with their daughter. It was a small comfort, but at least someone had my back. Still, the restraining order didn't seem enough anymore. Mike had already violated it, and I was worried about what he'd do next. The legal fallout has been a nightmare. My lawyer called the day after the gym incident. Mike had filed assault charges against me. I told my lawyer everything, how Mike had violated the restraining order and provoked me. He groaned and said it would be a tough fight, considering I threw the first punch. We're working on bringing charges against Mike for breaking the restraining order, and my lawyer believes that will help our case, but nothing is guaranteed. I had to give police statements, show them my injuries, and explain how I had to defend myself against my own brother. It's humiliating. The gym banned both Mike and me for life. And while I can't blame them, it's unfortunate since it was one of the few places where I could let out my frustration in a healthy way. My cousin Amy called me the other day. She's been taking a lot of heat from her family for supporting me, but she's staying firm. She told me my parents have been telling everyone that I'm having a mental breakdown. They're claiming Sarah and Mike's relationship started after Sarah and I split, and that I'm simply envious and unable to let go. According to Amy, most of the family is skeptical, but some believe it. It's frustrating to know they're spreading lies about me while I'm just trying to heal. Things at work haven't been easy. After the incident with my mom in the lobby and the viral argument with Mike, I can feel my coworkers' discomfort around me. My manager called me into his office earlier this week. He said he valued me as an employee and understood I was going through a rough time, but he believed it would be best if I took a leave of absence until things calmed down. He suggested we call it a personal sabbatical, paid, of course. I wanted to argue, to tell him that work was the only thing keeping me sane right now, but I knew the decision had already been made. So I agreed, thanked him for his understanding, and began packing up my office. As I was leaving, I overheard two coworkers discussing how Mike got my fiancée pregnant. I slammed my office door harder than necessary, taking some small satisfaction in watching them jump. I'd be lying if I said none of this was affecting me. I've started taking long drives at night just to get away from my flat. Sometimes I find myself parked outside my former place, the one I shared with Sarah, wondering how my life got so messed up. In the midst of all this, I received support from an unexpected source, Sarah's younger sister, Emma. She contacted me on social media, apologizing for her sister's actions and offering her support. At first, I was skeptical. What if this was some kind of trick? But after talking with her, I realized she is just as disgusted by Sarah's behavior as I am. She's been filling me in on what's going on with Sarah and Mike. Apparently, they've moved in together and are living as if they hadn't just destroyed so many lives to be together. Emma told me that Sarah's been portraying herself as the victim, crying to anyone who will listen about how she never intended to hurt anyone and how she and Mike are soulmates who found each other against all odds. It makes me sick to my stomach, but I appreciate Emma keeping me in the loop. Information is power, even if it's knowledge I'd rather not have. The social media environment is a nightmare. I've always been a private person, but this entire situation has thrust me into the unwanted spotlight. Someone, probably one of Mike's friends, posted about our gym confrontation on a local Facebook page. The post didn't mention our names directly, but it described the incident in enough detail that anyone who knew us could easily connect the dots. The comments section quickly became a battleground. Some people defended me, claiming Mike got exactly what he deserved. Others called me unstable and said I needed to be locked up. I made the mistake of reading some of the comments one night after a few too many drinks. It was a huge mistake. I ended up hurling my phone across the room so violently that the screen cracked. After that, I deactivated most of my social media profiles. I just couldn't handle the constant notifications and messages from people I hadn't spoken to in years, all of a sudden wanting to know the juicy details about my life. With everything that's happened, I've realized I can't stay in this city any longer. There are just too many memories, too many places where I could run into Sarah, Mike, or my parents. I've started looking into internal transfers, and there's a promising opportunity in our Seattle office. It's not ideal. I've never been a fan of the endless rain, but at this point, I'd move to the moon if it meant escaping all of this drama. I haven't made any final decisions yet, but the idea of a fresh start is starting to feel more and more appealing. A new city, a new apartment, a new life where no one knows me as the guy whose brother cheated on his fiancée. My parents have been unusually quiet since the restraining order was granted. I'm just waiting for the other shoe to drop, for them to come up with some new way to force their way back into my life. Sarah, on the other hand, has been broadcasting her pregnancy to the world. Emma tells me she's been posting constant updates on social media, ultrasound photos, belly shots, all of it, along with messages about how blessed she and Mike are and how thrilled they are to start their family. Each new post feels like a fresh wound, cutting deeper just when I thought I was starting to heal. So that's where I'm at right now. 2 weeks ago, I thought my life couldn't possibly get worse, but it has. I'm still angry, still wounded, but also just tired. Tired of justifying myself. So, Reddit, I guess this is less of an update and more of a cry into the void. I'm not even sure what I'm asking for right now. Advice, pity, or a time machine to go back and never introduce Sarah to my brother. Whatever happens next, I'll try to keep you all updated. Your encouragement has meant more to me than you can know. It's comforting to be reminded that there are still good people out there, even when it feels like the world is full of betrayal and lies. Final update. Hello. It's been a week since my last update, and I'm here with what I expect to be my final post on this whole disaster. First off, I want to thank everyone for your help and guidance during this journey. Your messages have been a lifeline during some of the darkest times of my life. So, where do I even start? A lot has happened in just 7 days, and I'm still processing everything. I guess the biggest news is that I'm relocating. Yes, I've taken the plunge and accepted a transfer to the Seattle office. It wasn't an easy decision, but after everything that's happened, I felt like I needed a fresh start. This decision came after an especially tough day last week. I had just returned from another meeting with my lawyer regarding Mike's assault allegations when I found a note in my mailbox. It was from Sarah. I almost tossed it out without opening it, but my curiosity got the best of me. Inside was an ultrasound image and a handwritten letter from Sarah telling me how pleased she and Mike were about their baby. She went on to say that she hoped I could find it in my heart to be happy for them and that the baby would love having me as an uncle. I saw red. Before I even realized what I was doing, I grabbed my phone, unblocked Sarah, and dialed her number. She picked up on the second ring. I didn't hold back. I told her exactly how I felt about her, Mike, and their little family. I told her she was crazy if she thought I'd ever want to be involved with that kid and that she, Mike, and the baby could all go to hell. It wasn't my proudest moment, but I felt like I'd finally said everything I had been holding in for far too long. That's when I realized I couldn't stay in this city anymore. That same night, I called my boss and told him I wanted to transfer to Seattle. He was surprisingly relieved. I think he was worried about how all the drama would affect the company. He promised to expedite the paperwork, and by the next morning, everything was official. I had 2 weeks to pack up and relocate across the country. Naturally, my family and social circle found out about my move pretty quickly. My parents, unsurprisingly, were furious. They showed up unannounced, again breaking the restraining order, in an attempt to talk me out of leaving. My mother was in tears, accusing me of abandoning the family, and my father was yelling at me for being selfish and immature. I didn't engage. I just called the police and had them removed for violating the restraining order. As they were escorted out, my mother yelled at me that I'd regret it, that family was everything, and I was throwing it all away. I just closed the door and went back to packing. Mike took a different approach. He didn't try to contact me directly, probably because of the legal issues, but he did post a long message on social media about how some people can't handle seeing others happy and how he and Sarah were rising above the hate to focus on their new family. It was clearly aimed at me, trying to paint himself as the victim. I won't lie. It stung a little to see how many people liked and commented in his favor, but I reminded myself that their opinions don't matter because they don't know the truth. Sarah's response was the most surprising. After our phone call, she reached out to Emma, who had been keeping me updated on Sarah and Mike's situation. Apparently, my words hit harder than I realized. Emma told me that Sarah had broken down, acknowledging that what she and Mike had done was wrong and expressing fear about the future. It was a small consolation, but it's something. Amy, my cousin, has been a huge help. She even offered to help me pack. She also told me more about the family drama. Apparently, my aunt, my mother's sister, had an argument with my mom, accusing her of always favoring Mike and pushing me away. My aunt said that my parents were finally facing the consequences of their years of favoritism. I can't say I'm not relieved to hear that someone is holding them accountable. As for the legal situation, my lawyer assured me that my move won't affect the case. We're still pursuing charges against Mike for the restraining order, and we're defending myself against the assault allegations. My lawyer believes the judge will see through Mike's arguments, especially given his history of breaching the restraining order. The fact that I'm moving across the country should also help show that I'm not a threat to Mike, which might even help get his charges dropped. I'm not sure if I'll post any more updates after this. Part of starting over is leaving the past behind, and as much as this community has helped, I think it's time to move on. I need to focus on building my new life, not dwelling on the past.